to be a tough one on the road for Citrus. I don't see them getting it done, but it'll be interesting to see if Mount Sac looks past the Owls at all because of the monumental matchup we have coming up in the Jungle in about a week and a half from now.
Yes, and that's what makes the JUCO football world so interesting. And this is what football is all about. Even after this week, after Mount Sac will take on Citrus and Riverside travels to LA to take on LA Harbor, it sets up a pivotal matchup between the Mounties and the Tigers. And while that doesn't necessarily decide the conference, we get a little bit more about who will indeed come out of the pack to win that win that conference, or at least get a wild card with the winner of that game at the Jungle. And Dan, I ask for you to put all of your emotions aside here. Mounties and the Tigers coming up in about 10 or 11 days. Your thoughts about that matchup?
Well, as of right now, the Mounties are the better team. I'll give them that. But there's a lot still riding on what will happen next week. I need to see what Nick King will do against LA Harbor before I make a decision on the October 25th matchup against the Mount Sac Mounties at Riverside College. There's still so many questions still. I mean, next week is the perfect time to get the playbook down, to practice, and just run over LA Harbor, because that's what they should do, Nick. I mean, it's a team that has lost every single game up to date. So, well, they did beat Santa Monica last week. I take that back. They are 1-5, but let's be honest, Riverside better run them over. They better play some more guys. They better just practice. They should use this game as just a run-through of what they could do, of what they could actually accomplish. And then we'll see what happens. I won't throw a prediction out there. I know that's what we do on the discussion. We like to put our. Well, you gotta save that prediction for next week's episode. Hey, you make up a great point. Let's leave these billions of viewers with the cliffhanger, and let's spew out our predictions next week for that big matchup, which will probably decide the quote-unquote wild card playoff spot in the Southern California JUCO Classic. Personally, right, I don't see Long Beach City College losing another game this year unless it's against Riverside in 3 weeks from now.
But go ahead.
The Mounties' only loss was against Long Beach, and Long Beach is the #1 team in the state. So you bring up a good point right there, Chris.
But I do want to, since we're not putting out predictions for then, it's still very early. We're jumping the gun here. But there is potentially the most entertaining matchup of the weekend, and it contains the two teams that came the closest, and one of them did, to beating the Riverside Tigers. Saddleback, who currently leads the National Northern Conference, they traveled to Grossmont in San Diego to take on the Griffins. It's a 1 p.m. kickoff. And guys, we could basically have that conference set up, secured, if Saddleback can can beat a very good Griffins team on the road. I'm sure Chris will disagree with very good, but that matchup, I mean, shoot, that's about as good as any here in week number 7 of junior college.
Yeah, hey, Saddleback reminds me a little bit of Riverside, and here's why. Here's a team that took Riverside to double overtime in a 37-34 win for Riverside, and they lost the first 3 games. And then they go on, and they're on the 3-game winning streak going into this week at Grossmont. So they sort of remind me of Riverside, where, hey, things can turn around for the better. And I feel like the Saddleback team, if they beat Grossmont, hey, they could possibly squeeze in there and be something to be reckoned with in the playoffs.
Chris, I would like to hear your thoughts about this game, and I personally think that Saddleback could potentially run away with the game late, but Grossmont, especially with their ability, when they can run the football, can definitely control time of possession and can really control the game.
Yeah, well, I don't know how Grossmont is going to respond after the beatdown against the Mounties, but obviously, if you're Grossmont, Grossmont, you're not expecting to go win on the road against Mount Sac. Of course, as a team, you're always hoping somehow, some way you can get it done, kind of like how Grossmont got it done against Riverside. But that was early in the year. That was before Riverside got everything situated. And you could almost see a close game against Grossmont coming after the double overtime game against Saddleback Riverside, like you mentioned, Dan Gavino. But this one, I like Saddleback. Saddleback is on a roll right now. They started the year 0-3, 3 close losses against 3 quality teams. Since then, they've ran off 3 in a row. They're undefeated in conference play. I really like Saddleback in this one on the road against Grossmont. Grossmont, it is, for whatever reason, a tough place to play. Maybe it's because it's one of the furthest games as far as travel goes for Southern California junior college football. But I like Saddleback in this one. Fullerton, you can't count them out because 2 of their losses, both of them have come in non-conference action. They're 2-0 in conference play. All that matters from this point on. You take a look at the final 4 games for the defending Southern California championship. The Southern California champion Hornets at Santa Ana, that's a win. At home against Grossmont, that's a win. At Saddleback, that game will probably decide the conference. And then they host Palomar to close out the season on November 8th. So Fullerton, they're set up nicely still to get themselves into a playoff spot, win their conference, but they got to win that big one November 1st on the road at Saddleback.
Yeah, well, you mentioned about the easy schedule for the Fullerton Hornets. You take a look at who currently leads the division or the conference in Saddleback. They face, first of all, a Grossmont team that over the last 3 games has been outscored 134-38. Even though it's at home, now at this point of the year, Saddleback has gotten their groove, 3 straight wins, and they should be on their way to a 4th. But Saddleback has a relatively easy schedule as well. They take on unranked Orange Coast at home. They have that Fullerton matchup the following week before finishing at Golden West, but 3 straight home games by Saddleback, and at that point, we could be looking at a winning ball club and a team that, with that Fullerton win, if they're able to get a couple weeks of rest here because of those easy opponents and then win, they could be well on their way to a relatively a nice cruise to the finish line in Fullerton. Despite the fact you mentioned that the 2 losses came against top 10 football teams, it wasn't even all that close. I mean, the Hornets have lost a number of key pieces to their state championship puzzle last year. And, I mean, if they're able, I guess, to fix what they have, the problems they have defensively, they may have a chance. But that's going to be such an interesting game between what Saddleback and Grossmont have in store and then Fullerton. If they're able to rebound at Santa Ana, who is a relatively strong football team that nobody's talking about, then they should be well on their way. But guys, if to come out of the hay here in that conference, a very early prediction, who do you think is winning that conference right now? Fullerton or Saddleback? We'll start with Chris.
I gotta go with Saddleback. Like you said, Nick. Wow. Sure they have the wins against Orange Coast, Cerritos, Ventura, Golden West, but after you guys saw them live, they didn't look all that impressive against Riverside, and after I saw them live and they got beat down by Mount Sac on the road, I just don't think they're experienced enough to go on the road and win in a big-time game. They have the road victory against Orange Coast College, and that's it. That's their only road victory of the year. They're 1-2. They're going to get another test on the road at Santa Ana this Saturday at 1 p.m., a game that I think they'll win to get a road victory under their belt, but that'll still put them at easily 2-2 on the road heading into their final road contest at Saddleback. Saddleback is never an easy place to play, and Riverside saw that earlier this year. Other than that, Saddleback hasn't dropped the home contest, and personally, I just think Saddleback, at that point in the season, 2 weeks from now, I think they're going to be a little bit more ahead of schedule than Fullerton College, and somehow, some way, the defending SoCal champs are going to miss out on the postseason. Saddleback gets in the playoff slot for that conference. I'm going to go the other way. I feel like Fullerton will come out of there between Saddleback and only reason is because the 3 losses to start the season for Saddleback, they just stand out like a zit on the nose. I mean, you're going to be staring at that all day. I mean, and it was their games against not the most formidable teams, except Riverside, who's turned it around. I mean, against Cerritos, a loss against Cerritos, and a loss against El Camino, teams that they're not doing well, to be blunt. And so that I feel like Fullerton right now, they have the easier ride towards the end of the season. I mean, they've got a game against Santa Ana, Grossmont, and then Palomar. I feel like those are games that Fullerton will win decisively. I'm not sure about that Saddleback game. That's a coin toss for now until we get to that. But I feel like Fullerton is the formidable team between Saddleback and Fullerton.
Yeah, this reminds me a lot of, in the NFL, the Buffalo Bills and the New England Patriots, who come in, the Bills do, off of a hot winning streak. They play a Patriots team that has been struggling, Fullerton being that ball club. But you got to believe that the better coach team and the one with the better quarterback, the one with the better overall personnel, despite them being young freshmen who, yet again, I'm sure are expected to improve over the course of the year, should be able to win that kind of game. And it all comes down at about 11 days from now as Fullerton will take on Saddleback College, and that may just decide the conference partner. But what also may decide this Trinity League, as we send it back over to high school, again, you're live at the discussion. Chris Sylvester along with Dan Cadino here, your host Nick Rice. And this may be week number 2. It's still very early, but some of these matchups may just indeed decide the Trinity League here, as St. John Bosco, of course, takes on the big number 2 now team in the Trinity League, at least according to some, the J. Sarah Lions, who are still technically undefeated. But Chris, can you explain how that may just indeed have been in jeopardy, and that entire coaching staff may be under some big scrutiny coming up this Friday?
Well, J. Sarah, they defeated Santa Margarita this past Friday by a final score of 34-27. It was a great comeback win for the Lions. Their running back, Edward Vander Jr., he went off. The quarterback, Nick Robinson, had a big-time run for the Lions in that one for a TD late to decide the game. Big rivalry win. You're 6-0, heading into the matchup next week with the nationally ranked defending national champion St. John Bosco Braves. And all of a sudden, Monday morning, you get a nice little knock at your door from the good old folks of the section.
We need to put some Jaws music on here real quick.
Yeah, we don't have a producer. Nobody's awake from how to produce Jaws music. You get a nice little disturbing knock from the good old folks at the CIF Southern section. And what do they tell you? They tell you, hey, your win against Santa Margarita, we might have to take that away from you. Because we're the CIF, and we just love to take away from people. And the reason that J. Sarah might have had to forfeit the win against Santa Margarita, and it really won't sound, you're gonna think to yourself, that's stupid. You're gonna think to yourself, well, that's a dumb rule. But it's a rule, and you got to follow the rules of the wonderful CIS Southern section. Anyways, J. Sarah, like all high school football teams, they had their JV game, junior varsity game, on the Thursday, the night before the varsity game on Friday. And there was a player participating in the game for the J. Sarah junior varsity team who was ejected from the junior varsity team. That same player suited up Friday night for J. Sarah, but he did not play. Now, J. Sarah claims that they called the CIF and they asked about if the kid could suit up or not on Friday night, and CIF never got back to him. Head coach Jim Hardigan said, hey, why not? Let's just suit this kid up. But to be safe, he didn't get any playing time, and he didn't play. He didn't have any type of effect on the outcome of that game. But the little snakes over at the rival Santa Margarita, who's lost now 2 years in a row to J. Sarah,